Hello and welcome to Tech Town.
Tech Town.
That's right, we're here, Season 2, Episode 18, talking all things tech. I'm Mr. Ellsberg, and this is our Town Wizard. That's right, all things finger wagging today. We're getting right into net neutrality, a big decision made by the court last weekend.
Exactly, and a big old ball of confusion.
Yeah, what does it mean? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to you?
Yeah.
Like, figure this out.
Figure this out.
Oh, we want to know.
Yeah, so I'm here to explain it. Don't worry. You may have heard all sorts of things.
Okay.
You may have heard the words net neutrality. You may have not even heard those words. And now you're gonna.
Okay, so we're going to tell you if it's blue or black or gold and white. That's right.
That's right. Yeah, we'll see at the end of this. Okay, first of all, this whole episode is going to be dedicated on net neutrality.
Yep.
We're just going to spend the whole time talking because it's such an important issue and because it's kind of confusing and because there's a lot of different ways that this could play out.
Okay.
So I wanted to spend the whole time, and it's also a good time because that decision just happened, so might as well talk about it. So, okay, so net neutrality. So let's separate a couple things. First of all, the concept of net neutrality is different than what the law or how the real world might act.
Okay.
You know, like there's always this kind of the difference between the ideal and what you think might happen versus when you involve real people and real governments and people making decisions and money.
Right.
It doesn't always play out that way.
Okay.
So sometimes people will get these confused. And if you hear somebody say net neutrality is bad, well, there's a couple different things going on. Net neutrality, I'm going to explain, is the idea, probably trying to say, is that when it plays out, it's not going to work out the way we want it to.
So you're saying that we don't really know what was going to happen, and maybe this was like a preemptive?
Yeah, exactly, right. We'll get into that of why now is an interesting time for it to be ruled, because some people might say, well, it's been working okay so far. What's the big deal? I have the internet, and what's the deal? Right. So there's some arguments to be made, but what I want to make clear is that the idea of net neutrality is that everybody should be equal on the internet. Everybody should have equal. Basically, nobody should have fast lanes. You'll hear that. It's like, let's say, Facebook pays a little extra to Comcast. They shouldn't be able to say, oh, we're going to make our users have faster experiences, whereas somebody for the Wall Street Journal, they get slowed down.
Right, so like a tiered system, and that's what you hear a lot of. But is that what it's all about?
Yeah, so that's not what it's all about. First of all, I have a couple links in the show notes that you got to check out, because I can explain the whole concept of net neutrality okay, but there's a million people that explain it already, probably better.
Right.
So first of all, watch some of these videos that I have. There's a guy, like one of the first videos I have is just a guy that explains it all and it makes sense. So watch that first. And I'll just basically say the idea of net neutrality is to make all traffic equal on the internet.
Okay.
So none can go faster or charge more or be kind of sneaky about not letting traffic get through. It's kind of like censorship in a way. When you say net neutrality, it's saying we don't want censorship on the internet. We want it to be all equal.
Okay.
So that's kind of the first big thing, is to make sure it's all equal. Not too many people have a problem with that part. Really what they have a problem with is, now that we agree, okay, everything should be all nice and flowers and roses and equal on the internet.
Equal. Yeah.
How do you actually do it, and who's like making rules or making laws and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so isn't it kind of a thing, if you're deciding how to make things equal, isn't it inherently like going back to the whole reason for having net neutrality in the first place, having someone decide?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to see who decides, and right now we have the FCC. In the U.S., we have our government agencies called the FCC, and they rule over things like this.
Okay, and that's a big part, right? So net neutrality has been ruled on in the United States. That's
true, exactly. We have a whole world that's connected to the internet too, so it's not just going to be just the US, but we definitely have a big footprint. If our internet either gets really bad, the world's will probably get really bad. Boom! Or if ours gets really good, and open and free, it sets a good example for the world. So even though we aren't the whole world, we do definitely have a big place to play.
Okay.
So I want to just mention the FCC. The FCC is kind of at the center of this argument right now, because in the U.S. we just had this ruling come down from the FCC saying they will regulate internet companies as utilities. That's kind of now where the rubber meets the proverbial road.
Okay.
So we all wanted this, equal internet thing, let's say.
Yeah.
But now we need to sort of figure out how that's going to happen.
Right.
Is it going to be that private corporations like Comcast and AT&T and Verizon. It's a free market, and they just, they provide internet. Maybe they're bad at it, and so you leave them and you go to a different company. Or, maybe they're making some of these deals and they were to say, oh, well, we're going to charge more for Facebook and less for the Wall Street Journal. Isn't it the user's place to decide, well, I don't like that, so I'll use a different company. So, in a way, it could be just let the market decide, and that's kind of how it
sounds like it's like a company to company issue, right? Or I should say maybe an IP to provider issue. Something like that, where it's the website, right? Say Facebook, and then they want to be treated equally. So it's the relationship between them and Time Warner or Comcast.
See, this is where it also gets confusing. It's a good question, right? Because there's two sides of this. There's us as like the users, let's say.
Right.
We're the people just watching Netflix and we're going to websites. So we have a role to play in this. And you're right. On the other side of things is the websites like Netflix and YouTube and Amazon, the website. So all of those people have an interest in this too, but it's on the other side, like you're saying. So, for example, Netflix has been a big part of this because Netflix is kind of clogging up the internet.
Right.
It's so good and so big because of all the HD video that they have to transmit.
Right.
When you want to watch an HD video, they're actually taking a lot of internet traffic.
Wow.
So in a way, it sort of makes sense to say, well, if they're using more from Comcast, they're basically using up Comcast's pipes, you can imagine, then Netflix should pay more because Netflix is the one making the HD video things rather than just like a little bit of text.
Right. Shouldn't they help build bigger pipes for Comcast or something like that?
And there's an argument to be made there.
Right.
But the whole point is that is one thing we can control in the future,
right? If
we have any sort of control at all. And this FCC ruling says, yes, we get some control.
Okay.
And when I say we, I mean the government. So this is where it gets a little dicey, right? So you have Tom Wheeler is the head of the FCC. He came from Comcast. So at first it looked like this was super shady. It's like he came just from one of the heads of the opposition of net neutrality, you can think, to then making the decision on it.
Right.
So at first everybody was really worried.
Okay.
But then people flooded the government with comments and all sorts of support got around this net neutrality idea. And they came down making the ruling kind of against what you would have thought from this Comcast guy, saying that internet should be equal and that all these internet service providers can't be messing with things. So really what it comes down to is it going to be a free market where Comcast and Time Warner and AT&T do what they do, and if they mess up, we as consumers go somewhere else, or Netflix, for example, they do something else. Maybe it's not worth it for Netflix, so they get out of the game. Or maybe another video company has a different way to do it, and so they get in the game. Do we just kind of like let it happen? Or do we have the government have some say in it?
Okay.
And all this was saying, yes, we should have some say in it.
Well, what about when the government has too much say? Didn't a famous person once say the FCC won't let me be me and me be free, so let me see? What about Eminem? What about his words?
Oh, that is true. We always got to think about Eminem's words.
So FCC regulating on a private artist as to what they can and cannot say. Who wants to say that they're not going to regulate on said company for being doing it is exactly what they want to do?
That's a good point, and that is kind of the main, I'd say, argument against the government, which is when the government doesn't seem to be doing well in a lot of areas, why do we trust them with this area?
Okay.
So, our healthcare system's a little bit rough. We got a little rough patch around the world with our military, and we have job problems here in the economy and everything. All these things where we think the government may not be doing the best at it. Why should they then come in and try and take one of our most important things, which is the internet?
Right.
So as much as that is true, the government does have a role to play in a lot of things.
Okay. We
We want our water to be clean. We don't want toxic waste being spilled into it. We want our food to be healthy and free of mercury and lead, and our paints, not with poison in it. And so we rely on the government to kind of regulate these industries. A very good example, because it's actually very applicable to this ruling is the utilities.
Okay.
So what the ruling actually was is that these are going to be regulated. The internet is going to be regulated like a utility.
Okay.
Like your water to your house, or your gas bill, or your electricity bill. And the reason is those things have been deemed so important.
Okay.
And so risky to let free to range in the free market that any company can do whatever they want. They're just too important. So the government steps in and says, we just have to lay down some rules.
Right.
And so that's kind of what's happening here is they just said the internet is too important. We just have to lay down some rules. And then they came up with a set of rules. And then that's a whole nother point to then see, well, is this going to work out right?
What have I heard about Mamma Bella Mia?
Okay.
So I hear that they're looking at a previous ruling in the 1920s or 30s.
Yeah.
About Ma Bell. Mio Ma Bell.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, so then that was a telephone communication line, right? So telephone communication line, internet, it's a little bit different. Right?
It is a little bit different, but it is a little bit the same.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different because, yeah, come on, talking on the phone versus using the internet to explore everything you could explore.
Right.
It's a different idea. The access to both of them, the infrastructure for both of them, they are different.
Right.
But in one way, they are very similar, which is they have been deemed as too important to let run amok. Okay. So there are intricate differences, but should we be allowed at all to regulate either of them? Or both of them.
Okay.
And so the government is saying in this case, yes. So can government regulations cause problems or stifle industry? Yes. But you kind of have to think alternative too. What if we don't have any of this regulation? So a lot of what you'll read on the arguments for net neutrality are sort of these down the road sort of stories where things snowball. And in a way, both sides snowball. Which snowball do you like better? You like the snowball of, one example of when net neutrality works great, the snowball of, then we all have wonderful access to an equal level playing field to the internet. Right. And we have more competition between internet service providers. Internet services aren't trying to do shady things. Right. Or the snowball of the other side.
Okay, so right now, you hear a lot of bad things about Comcast. You hear a lot of bad things about Time Warner. It doesn't seem like they're competing very much. It doesn't seem like they're trying to put in this infrastructure to make it as the most fast and the competition. And that's what they're saying that this is going to prevent?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple things in there. Number one is Comcast and Time Warner aren't doing the best job. And it's really because there isn't that much competition. Okay. And that's because competition is tough. Right. In this world where you're trying to provide internet to a bunch of people, that's not an easy thing to set up. Right. So I have an article in the show notes to a kind of an explanation of how hard it is to actually start an internet service provider. So one thing it's just kind of the case is that you can't have too much competition in a world where it's just really hard. Right. You have to build out a lot of physical infrastructure. You have to maybe launch some satellites. You have to have antennas. So as wonderful as we all want internet to be and cheap from every company ever, it's not easy. So some of these companies like Comcast have had to do an incredible amount of work and investment and risk. So they feel like, hey, we've done all this work. Why we didn't do anything wrong. We just built out great infrastructure and people are using it. Right. So on one hand, it's hard to have competition. Right. But on the other hand, companies can stifle competition. So Comcast, if they have basically a monopoly, and you mentioned there's not much competition. Well, that's not on accident either. Right. Time Warner and Comcast are basically the only mass cable internet providers in the U.S. And every once in a while, you have a few other options. But that's not okay either. We need this sort of competition. Right. And if they have even more ways to stifle it, that's bad. Well, yeah.
Well, let's go the other way then. And let's say everyone and their mom can start a internet providing. Like, what's the horizon going to look like? And I mean literally looking up at the hills, how many different cell phone towers and internet towers are we going to see up there? Is that something we want?
I would say that's better than the alternative. If we have that kind of choice, I'm willing to look at some antennas on the horizon. rather than the alternative of we have to deal with Comcast.
Right.
We have no choice. Right now I have CenturyLink as my other choice, and that's almost even worse.
Oh, wow.
So I gotta mention, it's not that these companies are 100% evil. I think it's easy to think these companies are evil.
Right.
These companies aren't evil. They just built a great service.
Right.
And their argument also is
maybe not the customer service.
Yeah, customer service. They have, but at least they give you some internets.
Right.
But they're saying that people are putting all these hypothetical scenarios. That Facebook charges more, or Comcast charges more for Facebook than the Wall Street Journal or than little Joe Schmo's blog. Well, that hasn't happened yet. Well, on the other hand, it kind of has happened, actually. Oh. So there was a case where Verizon was cutting off text messages for certain services or for certain users, and you'd have to pay more. And the thing is, they are in control of all of the data that's going in and out of your house.
Right.
So if there's no rules, they can do whatever they want. They choose not to most of the time. So the argument could be, well, it's been fine so far. But whenever they're feeling it, they could.
And you also hear sometimes where they say this sets up a precedent for which future regulations or support for the customers can occur. It sets up something because now it's regulated.
Right.
Now, if you want control of, say, your data, maybe it will be easier for you to gain those rights.
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is as long as there's something in place, we can work on it.
Okay.
So this version of the rules may not be the best, and it seems like it's not. There are issues in there. It sounds like it's, I think, 300 pages of rules. That's kind of complicated, but it is also a complicated issue.
Right.
So it seems like maybe they aren't the best, but we've got something. We've got a foundation, and instead of letting anybody do anything Wild West style, if we can hone in on those rules and make them pretty much the right rules over time, then the ideal is that we would have a more equal internet than if there were no rules at all.
Right. Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 1996 Christmas, I get a Nintendo 64 as a present.
Wow, that's the top.
Yeah, that's 100%. 1 to Nintendo 64, 1996 Christmas.
Okay.
How excited should I be?
About this ruling?
Yeah, how happy should I be about this ruling?
Okay, I would say, it's a good question. I would say you should be about a 2014 Wii U excited.
Okay.
Which is about, let's say, a 7 or an 8.
Okay, so like Virtual Boy excited.
Well, that's pretty exciting. Now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, right. A little bit of a letdown. But yeah, exactly. But fairly excited. And the reason you should be fairly excited is because now we have this system within which to work.
Okay.
It's not going to be the Wild West. We got something. We have somebody supporting, and not only that, we have big companies supporting this ruling.
Right.
So Google, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Microsoft, basically all the big companies are supporting this. Which is unusual to have them support it as well as the government supporting it. This is kind of unusual to have almost everybody supporting it.
Comcast, Verizon,
they don't support it so much.
They're not excited.
But with all that support means that we have this push towards equality. And it may not have all the best side effects, and it may not have all the greatest ideas, but we have the ruling now saying we support this. And so that's a good thing to get excited about, because not every day does the government come out and say, this is actually something we need to support for the freedom of our internet. So
there you go.
But that answer is not 10. That answer is not.
It's not 10.
1996 Nintendo 64 Christmas present, because we aren't out of the woods yet.
Right.
It's still difficult to start an internet company, an internet service providing company. So we don't have a bunch of choice yet.
Yep.
The government could do weird and shady regulations. Maybe they're taking a little too much money from somebody and they make the regulations unfair in certain ways, and then everybody has to abide by it. And maybe the whole internet goes down and we never get internet anyway. So.
Well, there you go. So the TechTown stamp of approval, it gets 8 out to 9. 8 to 9 out of 10 TechTown stamp approvals. There you go. And we're going to go ahead and jam out real quick. And there you have it. all things net neutrality. As usual, please comment below if you have anything that you would like to comment on when it comes to our discussion on net neutrality. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you again next week here at Tech Town.
Tech Town.
See you guys.